How do you take that leap of faith to actually do something? This guy named Craig Valentine, and he went to his boss and he said, "Thank you so much. Today's my last day." 3 times, Craig tried to quit and he kept getting a bigger raise. He would say, "You know what? I'm doubling your salary." He decided to quit.
What would somebody need to do to put themselves in a better position to be able to respond versus to react?
We tend to label a situation bad 10 times more than we label it good. So in terms of the response, the thing to say, good thing, bad thing, who knows? The moments you're chasing can't be engineered. So go, say yes. One day you won't be proud of how perfectly you...
A lot of people build a life that looks successful on paper, but quietly feel disconnected from it. In this episode, I'm joined by David Schnurman, entrepreneur, CEO of Lawline, and author, to talk about what it really means to stop postponing your life. We get into fear, control, resilience, and what changed when he finally said yes to a vision he had been carrying for years. If you've been holding it all together while wondering whether something still feels off, this conversation names that tension. David, how you doing?
Good to see you, Dwayne.
Good to see you too. I am anxious to get into this conversation with you. You are an entrepreneur, you're a CEO, you're an author of 11 Suitcases and the Fast Forward Mindset. And before we get into all that goodness of what you do, there's something that you stated in the introduction form to this episode that I really wanted to highlight and have you talk a little bit more about because it really captured me. And you said, quote, "There are only 2 things that you can control, how you think and how you feel. Everything else flows from mastering those 2 things." Elaborate on that.
So first, I didn't know this at the time, but that's straight up Stoicism. Like that is, from Marcus Aurelius and beyond, that is what Stoicism is. And you're in Toronto right now. I worked with a coach who completely transformed my life. She's in Toronto as well, so I want to connect you to. Her name is Kim Addis. And this was maybe 15 years ago already. And there's also a book that I read around the same time that transformed my life. So I had a lot of things happening. This is within the first 5 years of starting my business, where you're like trying to figure out like how to be a better leader, how to like deal with all the stress of running a business. And the book is called The Success Principles, Jack Canfield. Have you ever heard of that book?
No.
Jack also wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, which became...
Yes, heard of that. Yep.
So two really great things. And so from both of those sort of philosophies and Stoicism, in the end of the day, most people think the challenges that they face are on the outside. They think, if I could, my life would be better if I could double the size of my company, but I can't figure it out. My life would be better if I had more money. My life would be better if I had a bigger house. And so they're focused on like the things that are on the outside. And then on the flip side, people focus on things that they can't control. The weather. Certainly can't control politics, right? With what's going on in the world, unless you're in that right position. But for 99.9% of us, you can't control it. You can't control your boss. You can't control your employees. You can't even control your spouse. The only 2 things you can control are how you react to situations, how you think and how you feel. And in the Success Principles, the way he frames it, and I've actually put both of these things in my book, the first book, The Fast Forward Mindset, is E plus R equals O. Event plus response equals outcome. And too often in life, by the way, I can't believe I still remember this stuff, but too often in life, we all focus on the outcome and changing the outcome instead of focusing on changing our response. No, I'm sorry. We focus on the event versus our response to the event. You don't get the promotion that you want, so you're upset about it. You're focused on the event versus the only thing you can control is, okay, I didn't get the promotion. How am I going to respond to it? And how you respond leads to the outcome that you want. So that framework was transformational for me and is transformational for me every time I'm in a moment of doubt and fear and overwhelm.
Mm-hmm. I want to get back to that equation that you just said, but you said something, you used the term earlier, you talked about Stoicism. And I've heard that term before, and I think I'm trying to understand what Stoicism is. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So Stoicism starts, and I'm not an expert, but I'll do what I can. there, it's it goes back to, so Marcus Aurelius was a Greek emperor, and he wrote something, journals on the battlefield. He was the king, the head of Greece. He wrote all these journals on the battlefield of all of his struggles, and he was very inward and outward and thought about sort of like how to deal with all the challenges. And they turned that into, they found this journals and they turned it into a book called Meditations. Have you ever heard of that book?
No, no.
It's not necessarily an easy read, but that's part of the foundation of Stoicism. And then it went on to a lot of famous names that you've heard that honestly are escaping me in this moment. And the whole thing about the Stoicism is the concept of you can't control outside events, and you have to focus on in what you can control and how you go about that. And it's just a complete. It didn't exist before that, and so regardless of how successful you are, or where you are in life, focusing inward, right? Stoicism is the begin. So everything you know in self help most likely comes from the foundation of Stoicism, of that self improvement, of focusing inward versus outward. So that's the concept of it. And some of the highest form of like service in Stoicism is actually considered to be in politics, serving the public, and pushing it forward there. So I could go deeper. I don't have the knowledge on the top of my tongue, but there's a guy who has made Stoicism in the mainstream who I'd recommend to anybody listening, and he's certainly made it. I think he sold millions and millions of copies of his book. His name's Ryan Holiday, and he's wrote several books that summarize the master Stoics that are out there. And I think Obstacle is the Way is one, but there's a couple others that are even more popular. I would recommend doing some searching after this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even if I've done like listen to book summaries of some of his books as well, and you'll get so energized when you hear some things here.
Yeah, well, it obviously led you to a very fascinating equation: event plus response equals the outcome. Now, I've learned for myself that the R has a duality to it. It's reaction or response. And the way I look at both of those two things is reaction is instantaneous, it's emotional, it's highly charged, it's in the moment. You're not really putting a lot of thought into how you're dealing with a certain event that has popped up. Response is more caring, it's more thoughtful, it's more deliberate, it's really checking in with yourself. How are you feeling? Will this matter in the next 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, etc.? So you're putting more thought, you're stepping back, and then you're responding in a way that will hopefully diminish any sort of regret or mistakes that you make based on the outcomes. So I love the equation talking about event plus response. So I guess in understanding that duality, that people either react to something very quickly or they take their time, and that could be categorized as responding. What would somebody need to do in the immediate after an event to put themselves in a better position to be able to respond versus to react?
So I can answer that very specifically. And I'm going to share an ancient parable to sort of put it into context so it's easy to remember from this day on. And this is the most powerful thing I said those are powerful. This is even more powerful as a response. And this is a parable that takes place 2,000 years ago. It's about a farmer and his son in China. And they had horses in a stable. And one day the gate breaks and they escape. The neighbor comes by and goes, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. All your horses escaped. That's terrible." The farmer looks at his neighbor and says, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" 2 days later, the horse that escaped, because there was one really that escaped, comes back with 10 wild horses. They see the horses coming back with the extra horses. They get him in the fences. They fix the gate. They close it. The neighbor runs over and says, "Oh my God, you're now the richest man in this area. You have so many horses. Congratulations." The farmer looks at him and says, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" 2 days later, the son is riding on one of the wild horses. He falls and he breaks his arm. The neighbor sees this. He says, "That's terrible. I'm so sorry." And of course he goes, good thing, bad thing. Who knows? If it's my son, maybe it's a bad thing, but not for him. And in the final part of this, there's a war that breaks out, and all 18-year-olds are conscripted to go fight. And the farmer neighbor comes over crying, my son is fighting. I'm so sad. He's like, you're so lucky. Your son's injured. He doesn't have to go fight in the war. And of course, he says, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And the lesson of the story is we tend to label a situation bad 10 times more than we label it good. And as soon as you label it bad, you experience it as bad. So in terms of the response, the thing to say right away when something happens, and if you, first thing before you react to say, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And that helps reframe everything.
What happened in your life, your journey, that led you to this understanding of the response in this equation?
So where do I start with that? Let me start with like, I've had a very good life. So, and that's a positive thing, but also like an insecure thing, right? Like you hear a lot of people who are successful who come from, hardship and challenges. And I recognize like my dad actually, and my mom grew up with nothing. My dad's dad died when he was 7. His mother he was a single mother. She worked as a furrier. He was the first one to go to college, first one to go to law school. And both my parents sort of grew up, in that sort of generation. And so I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like I saw my dad, he ran a personal injury law firm, and he considered himself Robin Hood because he got money from the rich insurance companies and he gave it to his clients, and most of who were poor. And so I saw that, and I just always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so when I graduated college, I thought the first thing I would do within a year, I'd make $1 million running my own business. 6 years later, I'm on my like 4th sales job and just like feeling a little bit lost in my life. And I started to get concerned because I see people like 20 years older than me. They were on their like 14th sales job. And I just had this moment. It was actually, believe it or not, like right after 9/11, because I'm in New York City. It was we lived near one of the armories where everybody was looking for people who were lost. I ended up quitting my job like a month after that because I just knew that wasn't the direction. I just didn't know what I wanted. And I became a real estate broker. And when I studied for the real estate exam, I was like, oh wow, I really enjoyed the studying part. And I'm going to pause here because I didn't even answer your question yet. So I just want to pause before I continue. When I studied for that real estate exam, I realized, you know what? Maybe I'm not going to be an entrepreneur. Let me figure out how I can get a career, and I decided to go to law school. And so my dad always wanted me to be a lawyer, so it was the last thing I wanted to do. But 6 years after like being in sales, I realized, okay, I'm going to have a career for the rest of my life in law. So that's what in 2003, when I went to law school, I thought I was going to be a practicing attorney moving forward. So that was the beginning stages to to the next phase of how I got there. But I just wanted to kind of give you that context before I go there.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good context. It sounds like you were obviously extremely active and extremely focused, and you were driven. Did you feel that there was some sort of attention that was very obvious for you during that time that made you realize, wait a second, I need to take inventory of how I'm feeling right now, the path that I'm going? Was there something there that decisively kind of showed up in front of you?
I had this inner belief that I was going to be an entrepreneur and I was going to be successful for no reason other than I think the only thing I can say to it is like when I was in college, I used to buy Entrepreneur magazine and like read. Do you know that magazine back in the day?
Yep. I
And in
remember
the
that.
back, they had all the like ads for franchises and businesses to start. And I would just love doing that. And so there's just like there is a gap between where I thought I wanted to be versus taking action to get there.
Hmm.
And so I can't explain why that's what I wanted, but that was what I was chasing, even when I went to law school. And that's how I ended up actually becoming an entrepreneur. But that's what I was always chasing for some reason. And if I had to like look back and guess, I think a good component of it, the most important thing in my life, and I realized this early, was freedom and time.
Mm.
And I had some pretty bad employer experiences where I was treated like crap. And I was just like, I never want to be put in a situation like that again. And so I think potentially a combination of those things. And that was like, now ever being an entrepreneur is like, of course, like that's what you're doing. Like even back then, it was still big, but it wasn't like it is today.
Yeah. Freedom and time. So it's interesting that you're able to craft it back to your true intention, freedom and time. It's funny you mentioned that though, because you went to school to being a lawyer. And I'm thinking like, if you become a professional lawyer, when would you have freedom and when would you have time? My whole
It's
thought,
probably why I didn't become a professional lawyer.
I'm thinking like, wait a second. So you're actually unknowingly at that time working towards something that wasn't in alignment
Well,
with who you wanted to be.
I could speak to that because I had a very real realization. My second year, I had an internship at a law firm, and the guy was very talented. He was smart. He was doing a lot of things. And I just had this realization. I was like, wait a second. He is, because he was also a solo practitioner. Not only is he a lawyer, he's also a salesperson. So I just realized I left the profession of being in sales to wanting to be a lawyer if I was starting my own firm. But now I have to be the salesperson and I have to be the product. And I was like, that's ridiculous. That's like, what am I doing? Like, it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, wow, that is so hard to do both at the same time.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, how did you know though? Like for yourself, obviously you're going down a very, let's say, lucrative path, right? And anybody, I think anybody would say growing up, their parents usually say, "Hey, become a doctor, lawyer, etc." It's part of the parenting staple in terms of your dream of what your child does in the future. I don't know how relevant that is today. I think right now this younger generation is being raised much differently by this generation of parenting, obviously. But I think, if you're raised by a baby boomer, chances are they were telling you, go to school so you become a doctor or a lawyer. So for yourself, how did you uncover though? Like you must have been going through a lot of activity and tactics and
Yeah.
responsibilities, etc. With all of that noise around you, and for anybody who's going through that same sort of process right now, how were you able to stop and really see things clearly to understand internally I just wasn't aligned?
You're going to love this answer. I was my second year of law school and I decided to start. This is 2006. So it was the year YouTube was founded. And I decided to start the first, probably one of the first entrepreneur podcasts that exists. It was also a TV show on public access. And I was trying to find that magic answer, how to start a business. And I started interviewing amazing entrepreneurs. Simon Sinek was one of the first people I interviewed. And he'd just come up with the why. He hadn't even done the TED Talk yet. And I'm like, this guy is unbelievable. Like he is really special. I got connected. The thing that changed my life is I got connected with this group of entrepreneurs who are part of an organization. It's called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. You're part of that or no?
No.
Okay. I thought you were. And it's international. There's tens of thousands of entrepreneurs all over the world. There's minimum requirements to join. I think $1 million or more in a business. And I got to interview dozens of them from the New York chapter. And I remember thinking and I learned all these lessons, but more importantly, I built a network. And I remember thinking someday if I ever start a business, this is the organization I want to join. And it turned out 2 years later, they started this accelerator program. If you had a business that did $250,000 in revenue, you can go into this smaller program that they help to try to get you to $1 million. 2 years later, I was lucky enough to have a business that just qualified. And I was in the first accelerator program for this business, for Lawline, and being an EO and being connected to that network. And also some of the other people I interviewed, one of them who actually ended up building the Lawline website, and the lessons that I learned is a direct foundation, not only to moving to Barcelona in 2019, but to growing my business, to probably talking to you today. So that's why we're talking off air. You asked me about my podcast. Looking back when I reflected on this, I'm like, you know what? I started a podcast in 2006. It changed my life. Let me restart a podcast and see what that does. So you've seen the benefits. You run your own podcast, and I don't know if there's millions out there, but there's a lot. It's certainly advice I would give to anybody. It's the best way to learn. You can ask, as you see, any question you want. to really smart people and go on that path. And then you can help other people, even if it's one person to thousands, from those questions that you ask. Does it get any better?
Hmm. What drives you to help other people?
I think similar probably to you. It's this internal flame inside me that I could not stop if I wanted to. Like when I learn information, when I have something that's of value that has helped me, I need to take that and share it. Either two books that I've written, which are the hardest things I've ever done and the most painful, but also the most amazing, whether it's public speaking, whether it's my business where we have 2,000 courses for lawyers. We have 50,000 lawyers taking those courses every year to help them in their practice and support their clients, whether it's talking to my kids, I and podcasting. I don't know. That is the one thing, we have a lot of things that we have doubt in life about things. This is the one thing that's full force ahead. I have zero doubt on this is who I am as a person. This is my role in the world. We all have different. I'm sure you can relate because you're doing a podcast.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's really comfortable when you're able to find what that role is and you're able to sit into it and make it what you want it to be. And I think we're all human beings that are, we're born to create and be creative, and you just need to find what that niche is for you, and it could be anything. So
Can I say something?
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Because it was so natural to like who I am, there's a long time that I assumed every single person was like that.
Yeah.
I just because it was so natural to me. I couldn't stop it. And it took a while. And it's not like that long ago, maybe 10 years ago. But it wasn't that long ago where I just realized, oh, not everybody feels this way in life.
Hmm.
And other people feel different ways. And so that's when I realized that was my role. Because before I thought that was everybody's role.
Hmm. Yeah, we all have different roles to play in a lot of different ways. Um, you showed your two books there, and the one that I'm really interested in understanding how you got to this, I guess, title and what's behind it is 11 Suitcases. And I feel like I have an idea what the story is, but I have no idea what the details are around that. So, where did this originate from?
Yeah. So it's it it is such an honor that I was able to write this book for my kids and my family, and to be honest, for my legacy. It's there and it's out there. In 2000, it's we moved to Barcelona in 2019, and yes, we packed 11 suitcases to move to Barcelona. But that's starting like in the middle of the story, right? It was like, what are you talking about? And I don't know, like I started my business 2008, so I was like a decade into my business, and we were growing. We had an office. We had 30 people. It wasn't like it was a remote business. I was like literally leaving. I was the only or the second person to be remote from everybody in my office. So it wasn't like so turnkey. And I had three kids. So it started actually back in 2015. And in 2015, I had three kids, 6 years old and under. And I don't know, do you have kids?
Yeah, I have an 11-year-old daughter.
Okay. So 11 years old. And I can think if you would look back, now she's pretty self sufficient. But if you look back to when she was like 3 or 2, bedtime was challenging, morning time was challenging, everything in between. And with three kids, 6 and under, it was just, that constant rotation. And I started seeking out help from friends. And the main thing I needed help with, like, I need to get my kids to bed at night. And somebody recommended this book called Three Big Questions for a Frantic Family. It's written by Patrick Lencioni, who also wrote the book Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And he has four kids. So, and what was so special about the book, he took everything like core value, mission priority that you apply to business, and he applied it to family. And one of the things he said in the book is like, in order to help you get through like nighttime routines and bed, and all the day to day, you need to focus on what is your 10-year vision? Where do you want to be? What is unique about your family, and where do you want to be in 10 years from now? So we all sat around the kitchen table. We talked about like being healthy, having fun, having confidence. And at the very end, I threw in this word to travel. And we turned it into this sort of mission statement. At the last sentence says, we want to experience life through travel. Didn't mean any, like, what did it mean? A vacation once a year? I don't know. I didn't know what it meant. I just knew me and my wife used to love to travel before we had kids. I ended up telling everyone about that. And I was introduced to somebody who had just come back from living in Barcelona for 1 year with his family. This is still in 2015. 4 years, dozens of conversations, became really good friends. I kept asking him about the experience and why he did it and how he did it and where to live and how to do it. Finally, in 2019, our twins were going from elementary school to middle school. And my wife just kind of asked the question, or said, is like, why don't we just apply to that school in Barcelona where my friend's kids went and just see if they get in? And that small step was the beginning of the first step to moving to Barcelona.
It took you, you said it took 10 years for you to make that decision. So it was quite some time.
4 years to make the decision. So just to be clear, 4 years to make the decision. So in 2015 we set a 10-year vision. In
Yep.
2025, if we had to look to our life, we're living our life and experience life through travel. It took us 4 years in 2015 to actually turn that into something that actually resonate, that actually looks like it can be on that path when we moved to Barcelona.
What was the, I guess, what were your obstacles or challenges within those 4 years?
It just wasn't even obstacles or challenges. It wasn't the plan. Like it wasn't like we had that. It's like when he told me he was living in Barcelona, I was like, thanks for sharing this with me, but this is like a pipe dream. We're not doing this. So it, but I was interested in it. I was like excited about it. It was like, it's like, I don't know if you've ever looked at real estate or bought a property or whatever. Half the fun is like the 2 years before you buy the property of like looking at all the listings on Zillow and seeing all that. So to me, it was like I would visit this conversation with him the same way I would look at a house that I wanted to buy but couldn't afford.
Mm.
So it was never really a possibility until I wrote the Fast Forward Mindset. And it's true because I published the Fast Forward Mindset in 2019, but it took me years to write. And the purpose of the Fast Forward Mindset was to be more fearless in life, to help. I was trying to literally build a framework for myself on how to get out of my comfort zone more and then stay out longer. And part of that was like, okay, I need to eat my own dog food here. I just created a formula to be more fearless in life. I've been talking to this guy for 4 years about what he's doing, and I was telling my wife about it, and it took her to actually like move us in that direction to say, why don't we apply? And then we started using the framework or the formula to like, okay, let's move forward. So that's sort of a little bit of how that happened.
Okay, well, you just brought up probably the biggest golden nugget of life, which is how to move through life with fearlessness. How do you do that? What is that framework?
So let's start with the end in mind. You,
Okay.
you never ever get rid of, for me, fear. Especially as you continue to, depending, right? Because for me, my goal in life is to continue to grow and excel and to have more impact and keep challenging myself and get to that gap of what I think I'm capable of and where I am. So that means I'm always going to be fearful and saying, I don't know, what about this issue? What about that issue? So I've recognized that. And so the thing that I realized, and when you think about what happened in moving to Barcelona, is we were intentional. We were not just sort of like haphazardly, oh, let's just move. We were intentional. We wrote down a vision of where we wanted to be 10 years, and we wanted to be a traveling family. So when I got connected to David Rich about traveling, first of all, I wouldn't have been connected to him if I didn't write that vision, right? I didn't know that was Barcelona, but I wouldn't have connected. And when he told me about it, and when I kept talking for 4 years, I never would have pulled the trigger if I didn't have that vision in the first place, which I had no clue that meant Barcelona. So by being intentional about where you want to be, even if you don't exactly know where it is, helps you become more fearless and make decisions that fit that sort of path. And So I'll stop there if for before I'm just always cognizant of like
Yeah.
stop talking. There's 10 other things I could say, but I just want to stop talking and see where that goes.
Well, what does that look like to be more fearless, though? Because you mentioned that fear will always be there. So I can imagine it's some form of managing that fear or changing the perspective of how you look, or, internalize that fear. What would one person do?
So the way I think about when I write the fast forward mindset and even 11 suitcases, it's probably geared towards one type of person, which is a large part of the population. It's geared towards that driven person who gets stuck and then is trying to move from like thinking about something to actually living it. And so let me give you like examples in my life and probably you can relate in your life. I start a lot of things. I have a lot of ideas. And a lot of those things I start, and as many of those I stop after a short period of time. And one of the reasons is I get distracted. I get fearful that I made the wrong decision. And like when I wrote the fast forward mindset, there was two components to it, and the first part is how do you take that leap of faith to actually do something? And there is a story in the book that completely resonated with me with this guy named Craig Valentine. He's a public speaking guru, but before he's a public speaking guru, he just worked like a normal job, a normal 9 to 5, like you and me. And he had this vision of being this public speaking guru and wanted to take the leap of faith to do it. And he went to his boss and he said, let's say, Dwayne, thank you so much, but I'm today's my last day. I'm going to pursue my dream. And you said, look, Dave, I appreciate that. We really need you here. Here's a raise. 3 times, Craig tried to quit and he kept getting a bigger raise. And finally, Dwayne, like you would say, you know what? I'm doubling your salary. It was such amount that Craig salary was put up. He goes, thank you so much. Let me talk to my wife tonight. So they talked to his wife, and he came back the next day, and he realized, and what did he think he did? What do you think he did when he doubled his salary?
Negotiated triple?
Probably got a good idea, but he decided to quit. And the reason he decided to quit, he realized he was almost too good to be great. He was almost too comfortable in his good life to reach his greatness. And so often I feel like in my life, I'm like stuck in a comfortable hotel room, as an example, and I can't break through those barriers because I don't I want to. That's sort of the comfort zone, and I think about that a lot to help me push things through. And to think about, I'll use just moving to Barcelona as an example. As soon as we moved to Barcelona, as soon as we actually put the deposit down on the house, the apartment that we were in, I started having doubt. And in order to be more fearful, I think it's important to know how to deal with that doubt the moment you get it. So you don't want to lose the deposit and not move and figure out that out. And so I figured out the 4 or 5 key things that allowed me to get over that hump of doubt to allow me to do things like run marathons, move to Barcelona, build a business. And I'm happy to share those at some point if you want on how I did that. And that was step 2 to okay, being more fearless.
The intentionality part, I agree with. I think you need to have that forward focus, this goal, this outcome that you're looking to achieve to really help you stay on course, because you're going to come through a lot of different challenges. You're going to come through a lot of different obstacles. I'm a firm believer that you either go through it, over it, around it, or underneath it, but you keep moving in the direction that you want to go while you're appreciating the momentum that you do have. Because I think a lot of the times when we talk about starting something and then not finishing it, is we don't appreciate the fact that we made the decision to start. Like that alone is huge. It's like somebody who wants to get involved into fitness, and, they're not happy with the way they look. They're not happy with the way they feel. And, when they go to a fitness club to inquire about, memberships, that's a success. They need to look at that moment in that that time and say, this is success. I'm moving in the right direction. I'm moving from pre-contemplation to contemplation. I'm taking that action. I'm getting information. And these are the things that we need to really learn to appreciate. And I think it helps with that momentum. I was with my daughter the other day, and we were riding our bikes over a bridge in town, and there was this train. It was one of those transport trains that were coming through, and it was moving, but how fast do they move? Probably what, 60, 70 kilometers an hour. In the US, probably around 30 to 40 miles per hour, something along that lines. But they have like, 80 different, connections to it, and they're bringing a whole bunch of sort of things. But I was talking to her earlier, and kids are very insightful. I was talking to her earlier about a train that we want to go on in Japan, which is this bullet train, and it goes, 300 kilometers an hour, so it's really, really fast. She's like, that train right there, is that train going 300 kilometers an hour? I'm like, no, it's like definitely not. And she's like, well, why isn't it going faster? And I said, well, it's a different type of train. It's a transport train. So it doesn't transport people. It transports like, different goods and services and things like that. And she's like, where is it going? And I'm like, well, it's going all over North America. It's going all over Canada, all over America. And she's like, how long does it take? And I'm like, actually, I don't know. It depends on the destination. However, it gets to its destination no matter how long it takes. So I think a lot of the times we look at speed, and I say that story to say that, whether it's a bullet train that's going to get people to a destination in a certain amount of time, or it's a transport train just bringing goods from one state to another state or a country to a country, etc., it always gets there. And when we're thinking about the intention of what it is we want to achieve, we have to appreciate not the pace in which we're moving towards it, but the fact that we're moving towards it. So that intentionality that you talk about, I think is so key to keep you focused on your North Star. The question is, in those moments, there's still that moments of frustration. There's still that moments of doubt. There's still that moment of that internal dialogue where you start to ask yourself, man, is this really going to happen? What do you say, David, during those times?
Sure. So I will answer that, but just to say two things. One, I've been on the bullet train. It is unbelievable to be on it because not only does it go so fast, it is never, ever late. It's exactly where it is. And when everybody's waiting to go on it, just in America, everyone like huddles around, whatever. You're in a straight line. Everybody's in straight lines and waiting. So it's just a thing of beauty. So I hope you guys get to do that sooner than later. And the second thing about the slow train sort of getting to the destination, one of my favorite lines is we tend to overestimate what we can complete in a year and underestimate what we can do in a decade. So like that sort of reigns true there. There's several mental techniques that I use there's two things I think long term and short term. There's several things I do short term to get through that hump. And I'll share a couple with them with you right now. One of the first things I do is I have to reframe sort of what this feeling of like this a fear and doubt. And so there's a book called Fill Your Bucket. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It was written as a children's book, but then became a business book. And it's about how to fill your bucket with positivity and energy. What do you think is the number one way to fill your bucket?
Gratefulness.
That's certainly a big one for sure. Let me try to give an example of what it is. Dwayne, we've only known each other for less than an hour, and just from the pre-conversation to the podcast, I can tell you you're a great listener. You're really good at asking questions, and you have a lot of experience that you can share. And I'm really enjoying this podcast so far. How did that make you feel?
Good.
So, how do you think that made me feel by sharing it with you?
Well, you were the gift giver, so I could imagine it made you feel good.
Yeah. So the number one way to fill your bucket is to fill other people's buckets, as long as it's genuine. And so when I'm in this moment of like fear and doubt, the first thing that I do I genuinely try to fill those buckets of people around me who are part of the journey with me. And it's like really hard to frown and smile. You can't frown and smile at the same time. It's that same thing as it's just similar to gratitude, right? And so I would have this exercise of I had to fill five people's bucket by the end of a day. And I knew I was doing it just to get those five people done so I'd feel better. And I felt I was being authentic, but I almost sometimes feel a little inauthentic because I'm doing it for myself.
Hmm.
And almost every single time I'm able to get through that hump, at least get to even so I can think straight. Because one of the challenges when you're in that moment of fear and doubt, it's too hard to like be logical and focus. And I'll share one other that I have many, and I have many golden nuggets, but I'll lose people if I go too deep. But another one is there's a book called A Complaint-Free World, and in the complaint-free world, it has a 30-day challenge to go 30 days without complaining, and you wear this bracelet that every time you complain in that 30 days, you have to reset. So if you're 5 days in and then you do a complaint, you reset. Most people, if they're even able to finish it, it takes them almost a year to get through it. I got the furthest I got was 7 days, and that took me about a month. And doing that for 7 days reframed my thinking because I realized how much and how often I was complaining about like the weather, this Zoom, or whatever the little things that they are. And when you complain, you think less about yourself, and other people start to think differently of you. And they give this example in the book that sort of puts it into light and how you can use it for yourself. There's this paint store that had a bowling ball that was hanging from the ceiling, and there became this tradition. Whenever somebody would walk in, they would take a coat of paint and they just put it on the bowling ball. And after 15 years of every time someone walked in the store, they did one coat of paint. How much do you think that bowling ball weighed?
Oh, how many years?
15.
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna throw out 500 pounds.
Well, I mean, 2 tons, 4,000 pounds. And they have a picture in the book, A Complaint Free World, of a crane holding it up outside the store, and it's huge. And the analogy is just like complaining. Every single complaint is one coat of paint. It's not that big a deal. But if you're complaining for 15 years, you're carrying around a bowling ball. And so when I'm in that moment of doubt, it's so easy and wanting to complain. And if you do it in your head, but just don't say it out loud. Be grateful, fill other people's bucket, and then finally journal. Like sometimes I don't even know what my issue or my concern is until I spend 10, 20 minutes sort of like seeing where that takes me. So those are some things that help me.
How does somebody stay cognizant enough throughout their day, considering all the things that are happening, all the things that they're responsible for? How does one balance those tactics that you just talked about? And I'm assuming you don't do all those tactics at once, so to speak. Like I'm not going to fill fill somebody else's cup in the same moment that I'm going to, write and journal in the same moment I'm going to think about not criticizing or not complaining about something. But is there a strategy around putting all of this together?
All I can tell you, so number one, a lot of these things, and there's more. There's like there's a lot of these things are based on a neuro psychology and neuroplasticity and research about like what you focus on grows and where you put your energy. Your mind actually doesn't see a negative statement. So when you say like, I don't want to be poor, all it hears is I want to be poor. Like again, this is from research that I've read and in all those help posts. It doesn't hear the no, I don't want to be. And so and the reason I say that, and so like there's a lot of like these are things that yeah, to your point is like, okay, step one is what I do is all I know is I have felt that feeling enough times when I'm at my low point, and usually has to deal with business, right? Where I feel like, oh my God, my COO just quit. I'm 8 years into the business. This is a real story. One quit, two I fired. Actually, and he was running the day-to-day of the operations. I found out he was stealing from me. And he had a whole team of salespeople stealing, like literally stealing, like the whole story. But I was so far removed from the day to day I thought the entire business was going to implode within 6 months or a year, not even. And I was just like, oh my God, what have I done? And you can imagine that feeling at that moment. And I had three young kids and I just didn't know where to go. And so I never want to feel that feeling again. Like that was my goal. Like, how do I get away from this? And it still happens. And so it depends on the thing. So those things that I talked about, the reason they're so effective, each one can take 5 minutes or less to do. You can write five things you're grateful for. The journaling is usually the first thing I do is to answer your question because I need to figure out what the issue is. The gratitude is the second thing because those are both things about you. The not complaining is usually the third. And yeah, the filling someone's bucket is usually not the top of my list because I'm not going to go call somebody that moment. But once I start building myself out of that, the gratitude helps you because usually you're grateful for other people who are around you. So those are some of the things. But the more long-term things that I had to do, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit before with the train story, is two things. It's about figuring out what the plan is. And I'll say this, like consistency is the most important thing to getting through something. And there was an analogy that I heard from Jerry Seinfeld that, again, changed my life, right? But it really did, and I use it. Is when he was a young comedian, so listen up to this point. This is an important point. When he was a young comedian, he asked an older comedian, he's like, "What should I do to write great jokes?" And he said, instead of doing what most people do, they take one day off a month and write all their jokes. What you need to do is you need to write 3 jokes a day, but write them every single day. And then your goal in life becomes not breaking the chain of doing it every single day. So you focus on not breaking the chain. Don't focus on making an amazing joke. Just write the jokes. And I do the same thing, for example, with LinkedIn. I focus on writing a post a day during the weekdays. And if I had to focus on making a post that would like get the most likes and the most views, I would be too stuck on like each post that I did. But I know like they're gonna bomb. I don't care if it bombs or not. Obviously, I want it to do well, but my reward is not breaking the chain. And so that consistency I use over, and the podcast is another great example. I do 2 a week. I air 2 a week. I've been very proud about that. Like a year and a half of and being in 130 episodes is not an easy task.
Fantastic.
But I use that technique to get through to keep me going, and I don't overthink any one episode. Maybe that's a bad idea. The only downside is like somebody who well, I don't think it's a downside because somebody might who want to make it even. It's not like I'm not getting millions of views, so I haven't figured out how to break that nugget. And I'd say 99.9% of people haven't. But would I like to someday? Maybe, but it's just not. It's not on the cards today.
I like that you said that because that was my next question to you, which is how does one keep the momentum doing these sort of activities? Because you can imagine as you mentioned them, especially in this context and as you're talking about how to move from intention to action and to keep yourself on course, you want to start doing some things that are going to make you feel better, make other people feel better, and then by nature, make you feel better and keep you going, being very appreciative, being very grateful, etc. Now, these things sound very noble, very holistic, very natural to a person's being. However, when people venture into it, based on how we're talking about it again in this context, you're almost doing it with a specific outcome in mind. I need to start doing this so I can get and achieve this. But I like what you mentioned there because it kind of answers that question. It's like it's not about doing it to focus on the outcome because we'll always chase that outcome. It's about just doing it and being consistent with it and allowing whatever happens from it to happen. And everybody's journey is going to be different. Like if I start journaling, I journal very randomly. Typically, when I want to kind of name a feeling that I'm having or an emotion that I'm having and really kind of talk it out. I do most of my inner dialogue journaling more than actually writing it down, but I do find writing it down very therapeutic at times. However, I don't look at it in terms of an outcome. I look at it in terms of, let me just walk through it. So my feelings and what I gain from it is going to be different based on my experiences and the way I look at things and the way I move through life versus David, yourself. You're going to be doing it and it's going to bring you a different meaning, a different purpose. So I guess I say all that to say, anyone who's listening who wants to start doing this, it's not about reflecting what outcomes I've achieved or what outcomes David has achieved. It's just about doing it for yourself and really engaging into the feelings and the emotions and the outcomes that you're having while doing it and kind of leaving it there, you know?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I, well, I won't. Let me. I won't go into a story just yet. I'll see. I'll let you lead the conversation.
Well, no, this is about your story. Like what is your story?
So what I was going to say there in 2011, the first I think I mentioned already the Success Principles by Jack Canfield. There was a principle in the book, dare I say, that changed my life. But that had a
It
big,
changed your life.
but it had the reason I say all these things were changed my life. All these things became I codified them all in the Fast Forward Mind. This book at the end of my book, I have I don't know, maybe there's like in the index 30 books that it takes it from. So it was a great exercise. Like that's why I know these things on the top of my head because I spent 5 years writing them and now I live them. And that's the reward of writing a book. But going back to the success principles, principle number 54 was keep your commitments. And in 2011, damn, was I breaking my commitments a lot. I was breaking them at home. I was telling my wife I would clean the dishes and I'd fall asleep at night and not clean the dishes. And I cannot tell you how much stress that led to our marriage by me breaking that commitment. Because for me, I was like, oh, I'm a busy entrepreneur. I fall asleep, whatever. She understands. And from her, she says, in her mind, he doesn't care about me to actually do that. And at work, I would like break appointments with, my employees. And I'd be like, they know I'm a busy CEO. And instead of me saying they're the most important person. So I said, okay, I'm gonna follow this. What's the hardest commitment I can think of? At that time, the furthest I'd ever ran at one time was a 5K. So I decided with a friend of mine who actually worked for me, I said, will you run the Philadelphia Marathon with me? And he's like, let's do it. And so it took, when you run a marathon, because you talked about before, you know, I had clear goals in mind, right? Like, and that was helps you sort of see it through. And so when you run a marathon, there's three things that happen that don't happen in real life. Number one, you're given a training plan, right? And the training plan says in 4 months, if you run this amount have you ever run a marathon, Dwayne?
No, I
Okay.
have not.
Okay. So have you ever done like a triathlon or a race or any
Yeah,
type of,
I've done, yeah, track and field stuff I've done, but never done a full marathon
yeah.
before.
But so you understand when you do track and field, there's a training plan that you can follow that if you follow it by game day, you'll be able to do it. So number one, you're given a training plan that's time tested. So that's number one. Number two, you know exactly how far you're going to run. So on the day of the marathon, you have to run 26.2 miles. So you know the plan, you know how far you're going to run. So the only thing you have to put your energy on is being mentally tough to get through, which is not by any means easy, but it's why millions of people have been able to run a marathon who were like me and to do it. When you think about in life, there's no freaking 9 out of 10 times, there's no really clear training plan that's guaranteed to get you to where you are. The goal is not almost never as clear as 26.2. And three, you have to be mentally tough at the same time. So you're dealing with all three at the same time. And when you're running a marathon, you're just dealing with one. And that's the difference of what the reality of for life as for anybody is. And I just wanted to share that because it made it clear to me why some things in life seem so much harder than a marathon.
I'm glad you shared that. And speaking of which, is there anything in our conversation today that we haven't touched on that you wanted to talk about?
You talked about health benefits before. I'm 48. Um, I don't know how old you are, but maybe around the same age. And this stage in life, you got to start focusing on being more healthy, more intentional about that. So I got a portable sauna that I put in my basement, and I love the challenge of doing new things. And so the one thing we haven't talked about that is something that I've been able to like reframe my thinking in the past year is accepting and being diagnosed that I do have ADHD, attention deficit disorder, and I've always known I call undiagnosed ADHD, and so I've always kind of gone with life not even really believing it was a real thing. And you're familiar with, I assume,
Yep,
ADHD.
yep,
Heard of them.
yep.
What I was not familiar with was the science behind it. And once I understood the science behind it, so many things came into place in my life just in the past 6 months alone. And when you have ADHD, you have a dopamine deficiency where when things are just mundane, you don't have that dopamine that gets you excited to do something in your mind. So you procrastinate. You can't do mundane tasks. But when you wait till the last minute and you procrastinate and it's due in that next day or depending on what it is, you're at your best. When you do things that are hard and challenging, when you do new things, that's when you have the dopamine to get you through. And it explained a lot of who I am is because I like to do a lot of new things and I get bored of the routine. To some degree, you can say chasing dopamine is why I moved to Barcelona. And the reason I share it, why it was so important for me, on the flip side, I used to say to my wife, I feel like I have depression a little bit. And she's like, what do you mean? You're like the least depressed person I know. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm like, sometimes during the day, I'm just like so down on myself. And what I realized, and I saw Trevor Noah was somebody who actually talked about it. Mel Robbins talked about it because they both were diagnosed late in life. That when you have ADHD, you also get stuck in this fog of like so many things floating around, and you get stuck in not knowing which direction to go, and that is a depressing feeling. And so, by understanding this, in the past 6 months, I've been able to give myself a little bit more grace instead of saying, "What's wrong with you, David? You should, how can you be so high achieving here and so underachieving here?" Instead of and not really believing ADHD was a real thing, even though I know my daughter has it. She's been focused on it. For me, I just like it. Just everybody says I have it. Now I understand it's actually a neurological sort of difference of why I do certain things, and it's also my strength in areas. And so, anybody else who's listening to this who can relate to this, I would recommend, once you start talking about ADHD, if you're on Instagram or if you're on TikTok, magically your feed starts filling up with a lot of ADHD sort of videos. And honestly, wasn't the worst thing in the world. I learned a lot from these videos, including that I was there. And then I finally met with somebody who specializes in it and was able to get properly diagnosed to see who I am. So that's
Hmm.
something I think was worth sharing.
Thanks for sharing that. It actually works out perfectly because this is a great segue into a part that I like to call the letter to your former self. So it's an opportunity for you to speak to David at a younger age, prior to knowing all the things that you know right now. So I wanted to give that opportunity to you.
Yeah. So I actually ended up writing the letter to myself as if right before I went to Barcelona. So maybe I could have gone younger, but I think it still works. Dear David, you think you need more time, more certainty, more control. You don't. The life you keep imagining with your family, fully present, not postponing what matters, is waiting for you to say yes. It won't go according to plan. You'll feel disoriented. You'll question everything. And when the world will shut down and you'll be locked inside your apartment in a foreign country with no control at all, that's where things will start to change. You'll realize control was never the point. Resilience isn't pushing through, it's letting go. The moments you're chasing can't be engineered, they just have to be lived. You'll become a different kind of leader, a better husband, a more present father. The fear won't go away. You'll just learn to move forward with it. So go, say yes. One day you won't be proud of how perfectly you planned it. You'll be grateful that you had the courage to live it. David.
That is, I love that line. You'll be grateful that you had the courage to live it. I think we could all take that away. David, this has been a really, really cool conversation. Thank you for coming today.
Thanks for having me. And I hope to, this is not the last of it. I hope we continue talking.
Most definitely. Thanks, David.
Take care.